Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. On today's podcast, I am joined by Lauren-Ashleigh Whitaker, a passionate therapist and the visionary owner of Sea Change Health. Lauren, or she's also known as L.A., leads her business with a deep commitment to the mind-body connection, believing that true healing comes from addressing the whole person. Through her values-driven approach, she is able to empower her clients to achieve meaningful change and live more fulfilling lives. I am really excited to dive into her journey and hear more about the impactful work that she is doing. I am so excited to chat with you today, and I think the best place to start is by having you share just a little bit about your journey to becoming a therapist and a yoga teacher, and what inspired you to pursue these roles.
That is such a big question, right? I feel like, honestly, in my life, everybody has a purpose. And the sooner that we figure that out in this world, we align with it and everything just starts to fall into place. From a young child, I definitely realized I was an empathetic human being, cried way too much, but maybe that was also a sign to my parents right there. And I just really care about people. And throughout my life, as a family, went through a lot of different really hard things. I was bullied a lot as a teenager. And I know that the word bullying it's a word right now, right? But it was actually things that made me change high schools. It was challenging. My heart started to beat as I talk about it. And I remember my mom telling me, God gives you things so that you can understand other people and you can help them later in life. I remember telling her, I don't want more. God can stop now. And literally being like, I think he's taught me enough. And I struggled then, but I will say every time I'm given something really hard, really complicated, that is the voice that comes into my head. And so I really do believe that our challenges, our struggles in life, if we can get through them, we realize our strengths and we realize what we're supposed to be learning from it and where we're supposed to be helping other people. So navigating that, I think that probably laid the baseline for I want to help people. I want to do this. In undergrad, I worked for Girls on the Run. Again, I loved working for Girls on the Run. A piece of that is actually engaging with the girls you run, right? But you also learn about yourself and how to think outside the box. And we would look at magazines and we would be like, this is something fake. Like, you are beautiful for who you are. All these different things. I watched these little girls just really start to love themselves. And again, I think that continued my journey on to, okay, I want to work with people. So I finished my undergrad at KU. It was in applied behavioral science, which is great knowledge, but it doesn't really allow you to become a therapist. I went on to AmeriCorps, which is like Peace Corps in America. And I worked at Shalom House in St. Louis, which is a homeless shelter. And I actually just ran all their activities at the time. One of the things I would do is actually fitness classes for them, which literally consisted of stretching. And we would do line dancing, like cha-cha slide. That was their favorite. Or the wobble. We like wobbling. I, at the time, had gotten into yoga and realized, wow, this really actually helps my mental health. I'd been a dancer previously, and this was just something that kind of embodied that, but also embodied the parts of taking care of yourself. And I wanted to bring this into the shelter. And when I asked other yoga teachers to come there, they would say, the space is too negative. It's not conducive to yoga. And me being the person that I am, when somebody tells me no, I find the side door and I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to become a yoga teacher. Little did I know that would be a year process, but I'm going to become a yoga teacher and I'm going to teach these women yoga. That's going to be part of our programming. When I started doing that, I realized, wow, I'm teaching these women yoga and I'm seeing that not only are they finding peace and safety within their bodies, but after classes, they would come to me and they would talk. And all of a sudden, all these floodgates would open. And I wanted to figure out what that connection was. There was a mind-body connection happening.
What I would love to know is, in working with the Girls on the Run program and then also in that homeless shelter, do you feel like that was healing for you at all with some of that bullying growing up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think all aspects of my journey have healed me. And in seeing these young girls and the interactions between them, and in doing my own therapy to just understanding like the logic behind things or the emotion behind things, or even how I'm such an empath and I feel things so much deeper than other people, and having somebody explain that to me, that was healing. When I worked at Shalom House, one of the biggest lessons I learned from them is hope, and that we all make mistakes, and at any point we can all kind of hit rock bottom, and it's okay to ask for help. And I saw their strength in their struggle, and really learning how to approach their mental health, their addiction, getting over different types of fears, just actually being able to talk to them and ask them questions. I just feel like a lot of times we have things that we feel separate us from each other. And at the end of the day, we're all human, and we all could be in the same place, and we just need to talk to each other. And that's probably one of the things that doing my yoga training while working there helped me realize that. It also helped me realize that there's more of a story to people. So a lot of times when people are bullying you, a lot of times when they're being mean to you, probably it's because there's something going on with them and they're hurting, and there's something in their environment that probably isn't great for them. In ways, I think that started to allow me to heal. I actually talked to one of the people who had been part of the situation that I was in.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember asking, like, why did you do this to me? And sorry, I don't know why I'm tearing up. I remember them saying, like, you just seemed like you were so happy. And I was like, I'm just a happy, smiley person. That doesn't mean I'm always happy. And honestly, as a high schooler, that's how I was. I was scared to death. I actually lived in the UK all through middle school, and we had just moved back to St. Louis, and I was freaking scared to death. And I think I smile when I'm happy, sad, nervous, mad. It's just what I do. I smile at people.
Your coping mechanism.
It is. It is. And I will say, as an adult, I generally am happy now. But as a high schooler, I don't know, I wasn't going to like go into school and cry. I knew that wasn't going to help me. So no matter what was going on, I kept my armor on, as Brene Brown calls it. Like, I had my armor on. Little did they know that my armor was looking like I was happy, looking like everything was okay. Where their armor, maybe they were actually being more vulnerable. They were showing a side of them where they were, angry and upset and hurt. And at the end of the day, I wish there was more conversations in schools about that. When bullying's going on, I wish that people would be pulled aside and we'd be talking to both kids, because something's going on with both of them, honestly. And I have that conversation even with my son now. A lot of times when people are being mean to you, it has nothing to do with you. They just had a bad day. So maybe instead telling yourself a different story, or maybe actually asking them like, hey, what's going on? I'm not saying it could have fixed my whole situation, but I just didn't have the skills to even think about it that way.
As a former teacher, I would definitely agree with you. I feel like bullying, it's this thing that I think people have become so much more aware of. But I think it is also this thing that I think people don't know exactly how to tackle it in a way that is conducive to helping both the bully and the victim of bullying. And I completely agree with you that the conversations have to be two-sided. You can talk to a victim of bullying all you want, but that isn't necessarily going to change the behavior on the other side or address why the behavior is occurring from the bully's perspective either. And I think it's really interesting to tell yourself a different story, or to even just ask that person. Now, younger kids, I think, have a harder time articulating why they feel a certain way. If you had asked that same individual as a kid compared to asking them now as an adult, would their answer have been different? I don't know,
I mean, I also don't feel like we're giving kids enough credit, because I'll tell you right now, I can break down a story with my kid. I've got to ask more questions, but he understands a lot of things, right? And I have to kind of pry and be like, are we tired? Are we upset about this? Like those types of things, right? But at 6.5, he can finally be like, yeah, I'm upset about missing a hit at my baseball game. And that's why I'm being mean to you. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not the ball. So we got to figure that out. I'm over here cheering you on, right? So it's not fair to take that out on me. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, Mom. If he can even identify that, I think it's giving everybody more credit that, sure, we have to pry. Sometimes we have to get uncomfortable. And I think that's also part of it, right? We're all just very uncomfortable about talking about soft, different emotions. When I say different, frustrated, mad, sad, scared, vulnerable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It is. And I think it's because we label similar to our approaches on food, right? There are good foods and there are bad foods. There are good emotions. And I think sometimes we label like sadness or anger or frustration as bad emotions when it's actually very healthy to feel all of the emotions in an appropriate way, but it's learning how to navigate them. I saw this interesting quote the other day that said, it's okay to feel all of the emotions, and it's also okay to decide when to let those emotions go. That you're ready to be done with feeling whatever that thing is. And I thought that was such an interesting way of approaching it, that it's okay to feel sad, but it's also okay when you're ready to not feel sad or when you're ready to process that, to also say, okay, I'm letting sadness go for now, and I'm going to move this direction.
Yeah. I love Brene Brown's quote that says, without the darkness, we cannot have the light. I'm pretty sure actually they said a phrase of that in Harry Potter as well. But
I think they did.
I'm a Harry Potter nerd. But it reminds me that life can't always be happy. And if it was always happy, we wouldn't know it was happy. I reference a lot The Giver. I'm a nerd at heart. So
such a good book. That's such a good book.
And when we talk about purpose, I actually talk about The Giver a lot with purpose. And The Giver, I always think about that, how the world was in black and white and everybody had this like given role and they couldn't feel and all these things. And what I think about is, how boring would that be? I don't want that life. I want a life where I can feel the sadness and I can feel the heartache. Those breakups I had in my life and those friends I lost and all those things, they suck. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But because those things hurt so much, when the good things came into my life, I was able to recognize that. And when I allowed myself to trust those people and be open to it, it's life-changing. Again, you have to have the yin and the yang.
Let's expand on that a little bit, because on your website and in your Instagram, you reference purpose a lot. What does that look like for you in life? Is that always having a plan? Is that embracing and being open to the fact that a different purpose might be better for you? What does that look like, both as a therapist, but also as a mom and just a woman? We talk about that a lot on this podcast. Like, we're always more than one thing. So how does that play out in your life?
There's so many parts to that question. So if I miss any pieces, we'll circle back.
Okay, perfect.
But purpose for me, honestly, I hope everybody in life finds their purpose. And kind of how we started this whole podcast was, how'd you become a therapist? Being a therapist is my purpose in life. Taking care of people and connecting with people. Actually, so my values, which I feel like part of purpose and finding your purpose, is really identifying your values. And my two highest values in life are compassion and connection. And when I'm aligned with my values, things fall into place. When I am out of line with my values, those are those moments where I'm like, this is like in my gut doesn't feel right, where I am not being compassionate towards another individual, or I am not connecting in a healthy way. Like when I use Instagram, this is how we connected. I literally, as soon as somebody like becomes my friend on Instagram, I'm reaching out to them because why else are we having this tool? I want to connect in the world. So with my life journey, I'm somebody who, as a type A perfectionist in recovery, let's just say that, because I still love being a perfectionist, but it's my default mode. And I have to always try to be like, not everything can be done 100% and it's not going to go according to plan. Everybody always joked that I had a plan for my life. I got engaged and then I was going to graduate from grad school and get married and get my licensure. And And I did a lot of those things in order. And then life, I feel like, was like, okay, you got a little bit of stability on you. We're going to throw you a ton of curveballs. And all those curveballs, if I wouldn't have allowed them to, and now I'm mixing sports metaphors here, but if I wouldn't have allowed them to like enter my court and observe them and see how they were going to influence me, I don't think I would have ended up here. Or maybe I would have ended up here and been really, really sad and depressed. Instead, I took those things and I'm like, what am I going to learn from this? How am I going to use this to help me? One of the biggest curveballs was after having my son, I got endometriosis really bad. I mean, this was a like 6-year journey to figuring that out, but multiple doctors, a lot of misdiagnosis. I spent a year being diagnosed with lupus, on lupus medication, and not having lupus. They literally brought my husband in and told my husband, you will be moving to a 1-story house within a year. She will not be able to walk up the stairs. And again, I was like, are we sure? Like, do you see me? I'm a pretty active individual, like ADHD to the max. And again, this is my spirit of, when you tell me something, I'm going to start questioning and figuring out the side window, back door. Let's figure this out. Multiple doctors figured out I didn't have lupus, but I had something else going on. So the only way, I don't know if many people know this, but the only way you can diagnose endometriosis is actually with a excision surgery. So they actually go in. This is the only way they can diagnose it, is to actually have the surgery and see if you actually have it. And endometriosis is like a black sticky tar, and it covers organs. It usually is in your girl regions, but they have information where it's gone all the way up to people's brains because it can spread throughout your whole entire body. So within the past 2.5 years, I've had 3 excision surgeries. And then finally, I ended up having a hysterectomy, I guess like 6 months ago. And that was a curveball that I was not expecting. If you do follow me on Instagram, you saw one of my moments where I really did talk about this. And my plan was to have 2 kids because my parents had 2 kids, and just have 2 kids and they hang out together, even though they probably fight the whole time. I don't know. I have no clue. But God had a different plan, and his plan for me was to have 1 kid. And of course, there was a lot of healing to come with that. My own journey of healing, where I had to accept that and be sad about it and be mad and frustrated, and then come to the other side and realize like this was my path, even though I didn't think it was. I can honestly say now that I know it was right for me, because the pain I was in, I didn't realize how much pain. There were days where it would have been easier to have another child because the pain was that bad and I wasn't getting a kid out of it. Now on the other side, and not having that pain and having my brain back and having energy and all these things. And when my husband and I talk about that, I remember like 2 months after the surgery, he looked at me. This is the podcast where LA like keeps choking up because I want to cry, but
I love the authentic emotions. You let them come out.
My husband looked at me and literally said, you have your life back in your eyes. And I agree. I look at those photos of me from 5 years ago, and I'm not me. And there was like a year of my son's life that I was there, but I wasn't there. And so, I deserve that, and he deserves that. I was there. I wasn't present. And so, that became one part of my practice, is helping women like navigate invisible illness and hormones. And don't get me wrong, there are some amazing doctors. I have found them now in St. Louis. So I always tell people like, please reach out, because I went through a myriad of not so great doctors who didn't listen to me. Mm-hmm. I actually even had one telling me it was all in my head. And as a therapist, I literally was like, wait, no, I'm pretty sure this is not in my head. Like, I'm somebody that can take a lot of pain, and I know that this is not in my head. So I love helping individuals navigate invisible illness, the mental health aspect of it, because it's a mind game, right? That your mind decides like how much you can handle, which was a pro and a con for me. I think I have actually a lot of mental strength, which got me through, but it also was really challenging at times, and helping people advocate for themselves. Most of my sessions, I end up crying with individuals because I feel for them. Life is messy and hard and amazing. And all of those things together, it's crazy as humans how we keep going.
As we talk about shifting purpose. And a lot of times on my podcast too, I'm always talking about how when we have our eyes open to other things that might come our way, or like what the universe might send us, or being open to wandering and not always being so focused on our plan. Here's what's so interesting about where this conversation just went is that yesterday I got a phone call from my best friend, and she has had invisible illness for several months. And she just kept telling me something just doesn't feel right. Like, I feel like I don't know my body. I feel like it's betraying me. Like, I don't understand what's going on. The doctor that she was seeing at the time was chalking it up to early menopause, which we knew that she was already going through. But here's what's so interesting about what you said. She switched doctors, and she actually found a doctor who listened to her. And she put in an ultrasound and said, I hear you. I hear you stating these concerns. I think that we need to look into this. And they found really, really large polyps. And now she has to go have a hysterectomy. And she calls me, and she's just an absolute, like, I have chills just talking to you about this, because it's crazy that we're having this conversation, a day after my best friend, it has this invisible illness that nobody's listening to. And she's thinking that she's nuts, but she knows her body. And it's that mind-body connection that we're talking about again. And then here we are. And so now she knows that she has to have a hysterectomy, and that's a huge curveball. And just watching your emotion, but then hearing you say that your husband saw the life kind of come back into your eyes, like, it makes me excited about that for her, because she has had that weigh so heavy on her the last few months. And I'm glad that it didn't take 6 years for her to figure that out,
Well, and who knows, especially with polyps growing, it can have that impact. I found so many friends through this journey and family members that supported me and knew all the emotions I was going through, right? I wanted to do the surgery, and I wanted it to be over. I wanted the pain to be over. But I loved being a mom, and I loved our family. And there's so many things that come with that. It feels like part of your womanhood sometimes. I think that you don't even think of it that way, honestly, until you have to talk. Wait, what is this? Ironically, my sister has endometriosis too. We had our surgery literally 1 month apart. So this is genetic, by the way, and it's not just genetic, other things, but if people are like, hey, my sibling has this, maybe look into it if you're having some pain. But because we were going through this at the same time, it was that peace of mind. And I remember being like, I didn't ever think about this being my womanhood, but it feels like it in a way. And we had to really talk through that and be like, you know what, this isn't my womanhood. And one of my best friends is a photographer. And I remember her just being my cheerleader and being like, girl, you're sexy no matter what. And I was so thankful to have her. That at the end of the day, there were so many other parts of me. And I could also be scared, and surgery in itself is scary. So anybody out there with invisible illness, if you're having any of these concerns, I always say, please reach out to me. I've been through the struggles. When they say it's invisible, honestly, that's the hardest part about it. I remember a boss actually saying to me, but you looked okay. You looked okay. And I remember being like, well, what was I supposed to do? Be a therapist that looked like shit, and come to work and be like, oh, but hey, listen to me and let me help you. I was going to slap on some concealer and put on a cute outfit so at least I felt okay, and try to show up still in the world. But I guess unless we look like crud or we lose our hair, nobody sees us. So that's the hard part about it.
And isn't that interesting how it connects back to what you do, and the whole point of being a therapist that listens and sees people and tries to really treat the whole person is mental health and being okay. It typically isn't ever what we see on the outside, ever.
Exactly. And
it's so easy to hide.
It's so easy to hide. And it's so many parts of who we are. And that's why literally at the end of the day, one of my core values is connection. And connection to me means being seen, heard, and valued. We are all humans, and we all deserve that. And so I want to give that to the people that walk in my office or just I encounter. It's probably why strangers walk up to me in the grocery store and talk to me. I think I have that slapped on my forehead. But my husband always jokes. He's like, there's a neon sign above you. And I'm like, it's also because I literally can't walk away. Once somebody starts talking, I'm like, yeah, okay. And then he'll be like, who was that? I'm like, I have no clue. He's like, you just had a whole conversation with them. And I'm like, yeah, it was great.
You're my new best friend.
I'll probably run into him in 20 years. So,
can you tell me about somebody that you've worked with that perhaps has had a really big transformative moment just through working with you and having some of that yoga therapy and discovering that mind-body connection?
there's a few that actually immediately come to mind. And what's crazy is the spectrum of people I work with might see me for 2 to 3 sessions or 8 years. And one of the ones I'm actually thinking about, I saw her for 8 years. And when I met her, she was recently out of sex trafficking. And there was a lot of things we had to overcome and heal. And we did that through many different therapies. Obviously, we had a long time with therapy because 8 years together, right? So it was talk therapy, and we did some CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. We did a lot of Brene Brown work. I'll get more into that because I know I'm jumping around here, but we did Brene Brown work, and recently we had done some EMDR too for trauma. But woven throughout that, we did yoga. And I remember when she came to me, she thought I was just hippy dippy, and she thought I was cuckoo, making her do her voodoo doll kind of thing. But we would do yoga together, and I'd make her breathe and everything. And ironically, now she is a Reiki teacher and a yoga teacher.
No way.
So full circle. And she is one of the most amazing humans ever. She always has been. But seeing the impact she's making on this earth is just insane. Like, I am so proud of her. There was a client that I worked with that literally, it's amazing how much just words impact us and the people we connect with impact us. So I had met him as a senior, and I remember he had done some things along the way. His parents got divorced, and he had been kind of labeled the bad kid. And remember him sitting in my chair one day, and I was like, "You're not a bad kid. We have positive and negative consequences in life, and you just made a bad choice, and you had a negative consequence, right? But you're not a bad kid." And he just looked at me and he starts like crying. And he's like, "Nobody ever has told me I'm not a bad kid." And I was like, "What do you mean? You're loud, but you're not a bad kid. I think you're awesome." And it was just that wording right there. I hate the whole words hurt, but like, no, words really do hurt, and they impact us. And whether you realize or not, what people are saying to you and what you're saying to yourself, you start to believe. And so it was that day that I started to see this shift from him. And still he comes in for checkup sessions or just to make sure everything's on track. And he's in car sales and he's doing great. He could have gone down a path where he just gave up on himself. And now he pulls up in like a different car all the time. And I'm just like, look, he's probably making more money than me, honestly. And I'm so proud of him. I have one more that I'm like literally just thinking of. But recently I worked with an athlete who he was struggling. He had gotten hurt on the field. And that really messes with your mind because you feel like you're in control of your game. And then something happens. And every time you get back out there, you're afraid it's going to happen. And the problem with sports is if we flinch or that fear, it can mess everything up and you can get injured again. And so every time he got back on the field, that's what was happening. And so he was on the sidelines. It's his senior year coming up, scouts, everything like that. So on top of all of our athletic perfectionism, we have fear. And he's been training his whole life for this, right? And so I remember his first session, him and mom coming in, and I looked at mom and I was like, if he doesn't play in college or in major leagues, are you going to be okay with that? And she looked at me and she was like, yes, I'm going to be okay with that. And I remember him being like, huh? So just to be clear, because I knew as a mom myself how I feel about my own child, you've been doing all of these things and making sure he had Gatorade and taking him to hitting lessons and all these things because you thought that's what he wanted and you wanted to support him. And she's like, yes, not because I need him to go play Major League Ball or go to college doing it. I just thought he loved it. It was so interesting just seeing the shift in him. It gave him this grace that I can play to play and have fun again. That's one of the things we talk about is like having fun on the field again and finding yourself in the game and finding who you are not in the game, right? Hey, what else do you like to do? Do you like to play golf? Do you like to hang out with your friends? He likes country music. Who else are you besides the baseball player, right? So literally after 3 sessions, he was back on the field, and not only back on the field, but at the beginning of this week, mom contacted me and was like, hey, he has an offer already for college. And even more than that, she's like, he's excited, but he's also, this could be my choice. I don't have to do it. And what is my path after? If I'm not playing baseball, what am I doing? And we're like navigating that. There's just so many parts of therapy, and we've kind of come in and out of questions, but it's one of those curveballs that was thrown to me in life, that different things I've learned along the way, different things that clients have taught me, different interactions with different people, and seeing a variety of clients that I understand like so many different perspectives of life and how maybe a mom thinks versus a teenager and a teenager versus a mom, and like explaining that to each other. People are, it's so funny that it's like, I just sat them both down and asked, will you be okay? And I was thinking, why hasn't anybody had this conversation? But it's just not one that the mom even thought to have, which you don't probably, because you just think, I'm doing this, right, for you, because I love you. But the kid's like, oh my God, I need to go play professional baseball, because as a little kid, he dreamed of that. So
that growth that comes through aging and accepting that sometimes things shift, but sometimes the people around us don't also shift with us. And so then the pressure that we can put on ourselves to have it be this certain way because we think we know what other people are thinking and they think that they know what we're thinking, it becomes this vicious cycle of, I know what you're thinking, you know what I'm thinking.
Yes. So I don't call it this. Brene calls it this. So I love her phrase of the story I'm telling myself. And we use this in our house all the time. So it helps when my husband and I get in an argument, right? We get in an argument, but the story I'm telling myself is, you want me to do the dishes because you think I'm a female and I should do the dishes. I don't know. That's probably not what I'd say. But my point is that I'm sure at one point that's crossed my mind, right? And he's like, no, the story I'm telling myself is, I'm tired. I want to relax. I'm going to sit on the couch. And if you want me to do the dishes, just ask me to do the dishes. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was very different, right? So we all have a different story. This is funny. This happened like at the end of the school year with my son. So my son comes home from school and he's all upset. And trust me, as a mom, any mom out there like knows that when your kid's upset, you go into, who am I going up there and like, whose butt am I kicking, And he came home and he was like, nobody sat with me at lunch today. And oh my gosh, my own high school PTSD right here. Like I was like, oh my God, we got to figure this out right away. And instead I was like, wait, LA, don't go into mom mode, go into like therapist mode. So I was like, buddy, okay, tell me more about that. That sounds really sad. What happened? Did you try to engage with your friends? Did you try to talk to them and they just wouldn't talk back? What was happening? And he goes, well, I mean, they were sitting at one table and I decided to sit over here and they didn't come over and sit with me. And I was like, buddy, did they have their lunch boxes already open? And were they already eating? And he's like, well, yeah. I was like, well, I don't think they did that on purpose. I think you were trying to choose the table instead of just sitting with them. I'm sorry that made you feel sad. I'm trying to acknowledge, yeah, I'd feel sad if people weren't talking to me, but you can't just decide for the whole group sometimes, right? And maybe tomorrow you just sit with them, especially if they've already chosen a table. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you're sitting as long as you're sitting with your friends, right? He's like, yeah, okay. So he comes home the next day and I'm like, how was lunch? And he was like, it was good. It was great. So the difference of the story we're telling ourselves, right? If I would have stuck with the whose butt am I kicking?
Yes.
And not ask more questions or figured out what else was going on, other pieces of the situation or story we're telling ourselves, right? He would have gone with the story he was telling himself, that his friends didn't want to talk to him and nobody liked him, and gone down the whole rabbit hole of shame as humans that we go down, right? Instead of helping him rewrite the story and being, no, they still like you. They just wanted to eat their lunch and they didn't want to move. So you should probably move.
Oh, that is so powerful. I liked how you showed an example as a partner and as a mom, how that plays out, because I think it's so important for us to understand sometimes that that exact story can have drastically different consequences if we let that play out and we continue to add to it and add to it and add to it. Kind of going back to when you approached your bully, right? The story you had probably told yourself as you were going through that situation, all of your feelings were valid, but were probably very different than someone just perceiving that you were happy all the time and maybe struggling with the fact that you were happy and they were not, or whatever. That's so interesting how those things can play out. And if we just give ourselves a hot second to pause and say, okay, wait a second, what narrative am I about to tell myself? And what different avenues can that take me down? And which one's perhaps the most productive? How could I handle this differently?
productive, or if we line this up with cognitive behavioral therapy, we even say what thoughts are 100% true. And at all times, actually, most of our thoughts are never 100% true. So where could it be false? How might it not be true? The logic behind it, which as the emotion brain right here, hello, nice to meet you. That's where my heart jumps. My heart leads most things. And then I have to let my mind catch up and say, okay, what else could this be? Because a lot of times people don't feel the way I feel. I feel fully, right? And as an adult, I now also can guide my life a little bit differently and also recognize, okay, if you're not in it like me, that's okay. But then I'm not going to engage with you as much, right? And I know I'm kind of weird. And in a weird way, like I love with my whole heart. And it kind of freaks a lot of people out. And I kind of have to give people a heads up. Like when I write them a birthday card and it has all the things I love about them, I can tell, especially like newer friends are like, wait, what is this? And I'm like, I'm sorry, it might feel a little bit like love bombing, but I just want you to know how amazing you are. Because I think people should know that. I can tell that it's like, wait, do I have to reciprocate this now? What do I do? And I'm like, don't worry, it's just love. It's free. It's there. You get to decide what you do with it.
Yep.
Just don't run. You're okay. Safe. So
I'm a safe person, I promise. Yeah. So you touched a little bit on the Brené Brown training. How, as a therapist, do you decide what it is that you want to have be part of your practice and what you don't?
So if it were up to me, I will say I would get trained in everything. It's just the time and the money. But
okay. That makes sense. That's fair.
I will say, okay, so how I chose the ones that really spoke to me. Brené Brown has always been like number one for me. I heard her in grad school and literally I remember hearing her TED talk and crying in class. Obviously, that's not going to surprise anybody because I've liked her to hear multiple times. But I remember being, oh my goodness, this is me. She's speaking directly to me. She's read my notebook or my brain somewhere along the lines and gets it, right? Yeah. She actually is a data researcher background. So she had the data, she had the analytics, she had the logic to it, but she also added the emotion piece. And a lot of theories, honestly, just find the logic. One of the words that she talks about is wholehearted. These are the people that she researched and found were living and loving with their whole hearts. And when they engaged in life, they were all in. And that hit me. I was like, yeah, I am all in. And that is why I freak people out. But I do all in on everything, right? I'm always like 100%. And a lot of times, even 90 feels like, oh, I'm not giving it enough. So I've always been all in, and Brené spoke to me. So when she opened up her training and started training people on her theory, I was actually pregnant. And I was like, I'm going to Texas. And my husband's like, okay. So I got money together, didn't even have a ton of money to do that at the time. And I was like, I am going to Texas to get trained. And I am so grateful that I did, because now she doesn't even have trainings to be certified anymore because she only wants so many people certified in her theory, which is also amazing for us as individuals who are trained in it. But that was also just a curve godball moment that I was like, I'm pregnant, I'm going to Texas. And I remember being so tired after those trainings, eating a cheeseburger on my hotel bed and being like, oh my God, please give me strength to get through tomorrow.
Yeah. Can't imagine.
So, Brené Brown, I love everything about her theory. Like I said, cognitive behavioral therapy, I got trained in because, as I've mentioned, it is very clear logic. It was one of the theories that one of my therapists used with me. It made sense. I remember actually my husband reading one of the books, and he has a photographic memory, so he could then use it pretty quickly too. But it's just that logic behind things where you can take your emotional brain and turn it off and make it more rational, which again, as somebody who is an empath and I have ADHD, so rejection sensitivity is definitely a thing with me, and I needed that logic. And then about 2 years ago, I got trained in EMDR. That's eye movement desensitization. Say that 10 times fast. It helps you process left to right brain traumas and actually move it from the triggering part of your brain to the back storage part of your brain. It makes it more of a neutral memory. That's the easiest way to explain it. I still call this, in a weird way, it's magic. I don't know how it always fully works. it's crazy because I can see it in people's faces when I do it. So usually I do a 1-day very intense session, especially if it's something like sexual trauma, abuse, those types of things. I only see that client that day. I call it, we're going to hell and back together. So we are very comfortable at that point with one another. And I'm like, you'll wear your sweatpants. We're getting comfy. We got the blankets out and we go through it all. And you have to go through your whole trauma. But by the end, it's crazy because literally people, you just see something in their face shift. And they're like, I don't feel it anymore. You can also do it in a short way. And I do that more with fears with athletes. So again, I'm scared that I'm going to get hit by the ball. And we do just like a short processing of that. So that's a lot easier with the EMDR. I'm like, okay, do not want you to fear that. Like that I can handle in an hour session. So it's really to process trauma. And I've been a trauma therapist for the past 10 years. I had used some CBT with that and just talk therapy. But this gave me another skill set to really not just talk through it, but also take that emotion part away that sometimes I couldn't do through talk therapy. So those are the 3 methods I'm trained in. And then I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a yoga teacher that doesn't teach yoga. I pull in the skills to my therapy sessions. And that might be movement, but a lot of times it's breath work. And I still am always coming back to remember to focus on my own breath. Meditation is one of the hardest things for me, and I acknowledge that for my clients as well. So even if it's a short meditation, if it's a guided meditation, it's also just being present. So finding like 5 things you see and 4 things you smell and those types of things to really bring you back into that present moment. All of those things definitely guide my practice and are my theories. And then any book I read, I feel like along the way where I pull in different pieces, but my clients like read with me.
What would you say if someone's sitting there listening to you and thinking about these different therapies and things that you incorporate into your sessions? If someone's thinking, wow, that sounds really interesting and I'm having these feelings, but I don't really know what to do with them or know if a therapist is right for me. Do you have any guidance around someone choosing to come to a therapist? When is the right time? Is it always the right time? Is everybody a good fit?
I'm a therapist, so I'm going to say everybody's the right fit for therapy, right? But I do think it's finding the right therapist for you. So I think it's interesting because I've heard a lot of different theories on therapy and how people do it. Just the same as like chiropractors approach chiropractic care, right? So some chiropractors or therapists would say like, you have to come once a week. I really change up my sessions, meaning that it's individualized for my clients. So I have a lot of high functioning individuals that are entrepreneurs. That's one of the things I really do work with. They just need these little tweaks, these little skills. And one of the things that I do is I actually send them home with homework and I send them home with an email that I type up within the week with some of the things we talked about, some things to keep working on. And I always tell them like, for these individuals, I want you to go out into the world and engage in these things and see if they work and see where you're still struggling and then come back to me. Usually we're about 3 weeks out, right? And then we get even further out. I also have people who come to me and they're really anxious and they're having things that they're struggling with. And we start meeting weekly. But the goal is always to never be, I'm here forever, but to give you the skills to be able to do life on your own. And with that, you get further and further out. So I think everybody needs a therapist because there's this like graphic I saw on Instagram that's a perfect way to describe it, where they showed this picture of all these colors melted together and they say after therapy or after just talking about it, and it's very clear, sectioned off graph. And I agree with that. I also think that you have to know that you're allowed to choose your therapist. If you feel like this doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good to me when you're with a therapist, I want to say like you're allowed to fire your therapist, but and tell them what you're needing or just that, hey, I don't think this is a great fit. Not that many clients say that to me, but the few that have voiced that to me, I've been like, yeah, I agree. I didn't know how to say it either. I do feel like now in my career also, I know how to navigate when somebody comes to me if I'm not going to be their best fit. But as a new therapist starting out, I didn't know what that parameter was, and I had to learn. Just know that everybody needs feedback. And just like if you had a doctor, you don't have to stay with the same doctor, the same chiropractor, the same massage therapist, same hairstylist, right? You won't be getting your hair dyed purple and that's not what you asked for and being like, oh, it's okay.
Maybe those people who just are people pleasers to their core might struggle to let go of people that are not the right fit. But in general, it's okay to let those go that aren't serving you in the way that you need.
And know that you're allowed to ask them questions. I've had people come to me that they've had really scary past therapist experiences or not great past experiences. And they've asked me a lot of questions. And I knew that that's where they were coming from. And I'm like, this is how I approach it. This is what I do. Again, come in, have your first session. I'm not going to take it personally if you don't think we're a good fit. And I hope that you tell me that. Just know that the therapy is the place that you get to practice that, right? As therapists, hopefully we're able to understand where you're coming from and that you're needing that space to do that. I always joke that all of us at birth should have been given a therapist. We should just make it easy on everybody. Our brain is the biggest part of our body that we should be taking care of the most. It impacts how we engage in the world, how we see it, how we move through it, how we're feeling, how we're thinking about it, right? Literally, we talked about the story I'm telling myself. And if you can see the world in one way, but if I help you see it in a better way, like, wouldn't you want that for yourself? That's me because I'm a therapist, but it's also because I see the benefits of it. Honestly, I do. And I see how I wish everybody had these tools. I will also advocate completely for like a chiropractor, a masseuse, all these things, body work in general. We get one life. And I just don't think people should be moving through it in pain, mentally and physically. So
I 100% agree. And it really does make me wonder if we all did have therapy from a really young age, how different might our lives be and how might some of these physical ailments literally cease to exist because so many of them come about because of the things that we haven't processed along the way. And when they're smaller and as they're happening, you're able to digest and process those things in smaller chunks. It's 10 times harder to go through the EMDR therapy on this really big thing that now we really have to bite off a chunk of it and deal with it versus dealing with some of these things as they're occurring. I 100% agree that we should, from a very young age, just like we have pediatricians.
That's a really good point. When you're a pediatrician, why aren't we hooking people up to therapists then? Or just been navigating our health system to like make sure you have your yearly check-in.
Yes, normalize it.
I will also say, piggybacking off of what you said, what you are thinking can also show up in your body. I forgot the part of the story with the athlete I was recently working with. They had actually been through 2 months of health visits and they thought it was due to concussion. They were running all of these brain and body scans and going to all these different doctors. And finally, one doctor said, this might be anxiety that is showing up in your body as extreme migraines. He was going to a migraine specialist. And finally, they were like, okay, and came and saw me and literally woke up the next day after our first session, no migraine. It's amazing how much our emotions that we're not even releasing or talking about do store in our body, or our own fears store in our body. And just giving yourself permission to talk about them and feel them and navigate them. People think, oh, I've got to be depressed or super anxious or, dealing with something really big. But honestly, it's usually the stuff that I think sometimes it's really fun to come to therapy when you're doing really well too, because you only make stuff that's going really well even better. You keep going down that track. And again, maybe it's because you're actually leaning into life and being okay with all the curveballs it's throwing you and laughing at it like, okay, well, let's see where this one takes me. It's amazing to see my own clients' progress and to know, I think it's those stories that I walk away from and I'm like, wow, they can handle that. Like I can handle this.
The good and the tough stuff. Both of those aspects make us who we are. And like you said, the good can be better too. That therapy doesn't always have to be about the negative. So powerful. Let's end on this question. What is something that you're doing in your day-to-day life to help you balance these different roles or handle the curveballs that sometimes come your way? Do you have a strategy that you're using right now where you feel like, this is really helping me have all these aspects of my life in harmony?
I'm going to lean into that it's giving myself grace and not being perfect at everything. I'm going to use a book reference that we read in book club. It's Mallory Irwin's book, Living Fully, that there's glass balls and there's rubber balls, and the rubber balls bounce in life, meaning it'll be there still. Of course, you want to give everything 100%, but you just can't. So the glass balls, they're going to break and they need more attention. And I laugh because that is literally my life right now. This is my last week of working 2 jobs. This morning, I was getting ready in the hallway because we're getting a new AC in upstairs. Life is chaotic and you laugh, and our house is literally a disaster right now, which I don't love. I'm not going to lie to you. I do not love that. But there's sometimes where you used to be like, it's a moment. This isn't forever. Laundry, things like this, it will get done. But the things that are important are if I'm working and then my kid's like, Mom, and I'm like, oh, shoot, like I've got to put that down because I see him grow before my eyes. And I feel like he's probably taught me the most balance. Honestly, he makes me be present. He's like, hey, I'm here. See me, be with me, engage with me. He lives in the moment. He's starting to be a little more future thinking. But I just bring it back to my clients and say, think of bubbles, kids in bubbles. They're just very in the moment when they blow bubbles and they see how magical it is. And if you put down whatever you're doing and watch it, you can just see how magical it is as well. And he just really makes me live in the moment. Is there such thing as balance? No, it's not balance. I think it's knowing that you have your glass balls, your rubber balls, and you're going to figure out which one's more important and what you really need to focus on. That's probably a bad therapist answer, but there's balance in your own way. How about that? It's not being perfect in everything.
Someone once described it to me as more like life harmony, where when you're listening to an orchestra, there's all sorts of different instruments and they're all playing at different levels and speeds and powers and, volumes. And it's all meant to create a harmony. And each one of them is important, but it's a matter of what's kind of at the forefront right now and what needs to fall into the background. And with the rubber balls and the glass balls, it's the exact same concept. You need all of them. They're all going to happen no matter what. You have to address them, but it's a matter of, to your point, what are you going to pay attention to right now versus what are you going to let sit there and bounce?
And what can bounce, right? My kid, he can bounce by going to my mom's. That's fine. But he can't bounce by me not being at certain things. Yeah. There are some things I've got to drop for him, and that's okay. Yeah. And I'm lucky that I have a partner that, and I'm not going to say both of us are not perfect, but we have learned in life to really communicate. And so on Sunday, one of our things is really communicating what our weeks look like and making sure that we have our glass balls covered. And another skill that we use that I teach to a lot of my couples is when we're both, especially in a really busy season of life, we come in and kind of ask each other's measurement on a scale of where our energy's at. So we do a 1 to 100 scale. And so if he's like, I'm at a 40% and I'm like, I'm at a 50, so I got you. You need to go take a 20-minute power nap, do whatever you need to do, right? To pick it back up. Or maybe we're both at 50 and so we're powering on together. If after a week, if we both have been under 50% consistently, we have to reevaluate and be, okay, what can we take off our plate right now? Yeah. Because life can't keep going on like this where we're just powering through so much that we're not connecting.
What a powerful strategy. I like approaching it in that way. The partnership mentality and carrying each other because we'll all need it at some point in time.
We're partners, but also realizing that different things come up and it's not one person doing one thing, one person doing another thing. It's that at the end of the day, this is our team. This is our household that we have. And so we got to be all in together. We really got to work together on that. It's that measurement scale that has kind of helped us. And I think just putting it in that number really helped my husband. Like me being like, oh, I'm tired, or him saying that we don't know what that means. Sometimes you're always tired, but at what level? Did your day wear you out more? I think it also is kind of a check-in for yourself. Like, all week I'm like, I'm at a 30%. Then it's like, what are you doing? How are you not taking care of yourself? You need to start pouring into yourself and not just pouring into others. And when you take that break, what are you doing? For me, it's putting down my phone and go take a walk or go work out, which my son likes doing with me anyway. So
my kiddo likes doing that with me too. It's my favorite.
It's very cute when they're doing it with you. Yes. Now, he's also become, I feel like, my personal trainer who calls me out. He's like, Mom, we haven't worked out today. And I'm like, I could have done it while you were at school. He's like, I think that we need to work out again. And I'm like, let's go work out. Let's go burn energy. Let's go.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Well, Lauren, this hour flew by way too fast. We seriously got through, I think, not even half of the questions. So you might need to come back on to the podcast so we can have a whole nother conversation about all the things we didn't get to. I'll be sure to link all of your information in the podcast description as well so that people can find you, reach out. And thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. This is my first podcast. I was super nervous. So thank you for having me. It was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Crushed it.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.